A few months back, I put out a provocative tweet stating that it's more likely than not that we shall witness Hild's demise by the end of the series, but I failed to give any justification for that belief at the time. This was because it was a realization that struck out of the blue, one point that brought me to the conclusion that not only that Hild will die, but Hild must die. Point a half. Who else is going to die that we actually care about? Let's be honest here. Hild is probably the most popular character currently active in the manga. Who gets the most praise? Who gets the most views? Who gets the most likes on Twitter? And who has the most people down bad? Ever since chapter 191, or perhaps even chapter 188, the praise and hype for Hild has been astronomical. If Yukimura wants to maximize hurt and impact on the audience with the character death, Hild is that character. She has had the steady focus since her introduction, and she's a part of our core cast. This doesn't mean that Hild is the only possibility. In fact, when people talk about possible character deaths, there are probably two names that come up more often. The first is Aina. He used to be the main contender for death flags, but at this point, in my opinion, I think his death will have minimal impact. All our emotional investment in him has been cruising since Hild's introduction. He has been relegated to a reactionary character, and look, he has had some really nice moments and good bits of dialogue, but he hasn't made any proactive or crucial decisions, being the main focus of a scene, or had any substantial development since he tackled Thorfinn in the snow. I can see him being buried next to Arni's statue and having a really heart-wrenching send-off, but I really want to see him taking more of a driving role before then. And secondly, Thorfinn himself could die. After all, sacrificing himself in a similar way of Thor's, dying to keep the idea and love of Vinland being a peaceful nation alive. It may not be historically accurate, but we've always got the Thorfinn replacement theories as a backup, with Bug Eyes then transforming into the Thorfinn we know from history. While this may not be probable, I definitely see it being possible. And of course, there are other characters that could easily see their demise before the end of the series, but the key thing here is that Hild is the most likely of the core characters to do so. She is still acting as an independent party. She is pushing the story forward and forcing others to react to her actions. Point 1. The arc's flashpoint. What sparked this video back into my mind was the fact that Hild actually seems like she will be playing more of a role after chapter 191. It would have been easy to let her coast from here on out, but I think it's really interesting to see her still be used. She will probably end up actually accelerating and exacerbating tensions in Vinland, all in the attempt to try and stop violence before it happens. Not so dissimilar to many other characters in this arc. Yukimura tends to like building up his arcs piece by piece, but then use one or a couple of decisions lead to the decline and formation of the comfy status quo that he has previously built up. Some of these moments come in a time of weakness and folly, but also they come from independent parties stepping in and flipping the script. The Vinland arc may have already had this moment, that being Ivar cutting off the hand of Miss Heg Piquet, a moment that had been built up to have all the motivations be perfectly aligned to cause the maximal amount of miscommunication, with all the characters acting rationally in line with their own worldviews, taking the most obvious choices at that time, at least in their opinions. But hey folks, this doesn't mean we can't double dip. These characters that make these status quo breaking decisions have a relatively high death count. And the last time we had a battle-seeking bloke and a war-traumatized victim make these decisions in an arc, well, one of them got to grow, and the other perished. Hild is not a character with many, if any, obvious flaws in her decision-making. She is not rash. and she has only really made one mistake in her judgment so far in the series. Yukimura has set her up to have a strong motive that also sees very clearly from Thorfinn's own perspective, despite going a different way. Not so different, once again, from many other characters in this arc. She wants to prevent the children that she cares about from experiencing the same traumatizing event she did as a child. Interestingly, she still holds on to this regret of not being strong enough to defend her family. This regret of being too weak, this corrupted form of survivor's guilt that is still within her, along with that prologue Thorfinn worldview that lingers in her mind. It's awesome to see a character transform so much over time, but still being very, very influenced by our past. Point, well, the main one. Her presence in the story breaks history. Like, literally. Up until now, I've talked about why it's likely she will die, but now let me tell you why she must die. Chapter 189 is one of the more controversial chapters in recent times for a variety of reasons that I shall not delve into completely here, but one of the ones I want to focus on was the fact that it could lead to a broken technological timeline. The shaman sees the future. He then observes the guns, and then from this knowledge, he is able to backwards engineer it to their current day, causing many time paradoxes, leading us down the oh so dreaded ahistorical route. But Hild, from her very introduction, breaks this technological timeline as well. Her crossbow itself is a design from the 13th century, but this was also the same model in chapter 1, so it's probably just a minor historical error on Yukimura's part. But oh, what's this? She is designing and engineering technology in her village well before its time. The most obvious example of this is the design of a ball bearing on her dining table, something that was only first patented in 1777, you know, about 750 years later than our current day in Vinland Saga, and casually beating Leonardo da Vinci to the theory of it by over 500 years. But as we all know, the ball bearing may have just stayed a theory because it was very hard, if not impossible, to manufacture. And, of course, no harm was done, since all this technology was burnt to the ground. Good thing Askeladd and his band turned up, because otherwise we may have to worry about a diving mask, a miniature plane, plans for extending wings, plans for an actual helicopter. And who knows what else is in that room. She is just a Norwegian Da Vinci, but also beating that Da Vinci to the punch by half a millennium. But that's okay, all of it was burnt down. It's not like they've totally got a thresher in Vinland. The first of its kind to exist in our world was in 1786. You want to know what also existed in 1786? The United States of America, the Atlantic slave trade, the British Empire, and Napoleon was 17. Oh, and those muskets, the things that we were scared of Miss Haig Piquet possibly getting his hands on, well, those have been around for already 200 years. If Hild pulled out a Glock and shot a lad dangling from a tree, I say we shouldn't be too surprised. Hild's brain is so time-breaking that not even Thorkel's strength, Jarbeth's mug, a shaman literally connected to the spiritual realm, or Ymir, could compare. You can destroy her inventions, distract her with revenge, but the only antidote to her brain power and craftsmanship is death. And that is why Hild must die. I personally doubt many of you were convinced by my reasoning, and I don't expect you to. This argument feels more like I'm winning on a technicality rather than a deeper, more established argument. But I genuinely do see Hild's death as quite likely. If we are going to see a character death, I think hers makes a tremendous amount of sense. Interestingly, in the chapter discussions of chapter 118, where this panel turns up, that was released 8 years ago, good grief, no one is actually bringing up that panel and instead just fully buying into it. this is not a problem that seems to cause much issue with the audience. So I don't see harm in ignoring it. Yukimura makes this tech feel more to their current day by using materials such as wood or more craftable materials. Hild is a mechanic and not a chemist. She only just supposes that the Earth is actually round. She isn't quite onto, atomic theory just yet. So stuff that works on analog or mechanical systems seem within much more reason than weapons that rely on certain chemical knowledge. To take a step back, this is just a very interesting thought experiment in general. The idea of lost technology is a fascinating one for sure, and the mechanical phenomenon, for example, of the ball bearing, is based on a principle known to even the Egyptians way back when. So it's perfectly possible that someone could have figured out the ball bearing in theory before Leonardo da Vinci. We just have no records of it. And finally, there are plenty of ways to write around this problem. Hild, after all, could choose to forsake technology because of all the destruction it causes. Maybe she ends up just going into the North American wilderness and living out a more simple life. So many possibilities could happen to erase Hild's brain from this small plot hole that exists. Chapter 199 left us on quite the cliffhanger, so this makes me very, very excited to see what's coming out in chapter 200. Could you tell I recorded this over 6 weeks ago? Alright, so here's an addendum to my already made addendum of me going to be rambling about a couple of things because you guys on Twitter said you wanted me to ramble, and this is what you're going to get, baby. Furthermore, if you want to go see something that's probably a bit more in depth, a bit more scripted, feel free to go check out Mir's video. I haven't watched it yet because I wanted to keep my thoughts to myself, I guess. I don't know. It's not the best I did, but go watch it. Whoa. Bam. See, it's right there. You can go check out it here. I'm gonna flick it over to the other phone. Wow. I'm having too much fun with this camera. So, Vinland Saga is getting a bit spicy at the moment. Plot is actually happening. We're out of this kind of cutesy slice of life where we like to sit around and discuss ideas. And now we're actually doing something different because now we got some action going on. Whoa! Season 1 fans rejoice. Am I right, fellas? I'm just kidding. Not all of you guys are Shonen Baby fans, okay? I understand, okay? Some of you guys like deep characters like Jabath. Whew! That guy, he's like the Mariana Trench. So chapter 200 has been building upon the thematic ideas that this arc has already established, but I think to ultimately get the core of what is maybe one of the more interesting ideas presented throughout this arc is the idea of the most dangerous man, which has been shown off initially in chapter 182 when, Thorfinn and Ivar around the campsite and they're talking to each other, and Ivar kind of stands up and is like, Thorfinn, you're kind of weird, bro. You don't like the fight and war. You're the odd one out. And then Thorfinn, kind of makes an observation that Ivar's not this type of man that Thorfinn is most scared of. No, there's a different type of person that is way more intimidating to him, and that's the type of person that says they hate war, that proclaims to absolutely despise it, and yet they still participate in it and still create it and perpetuate it, despite what their beliefs may say. Then you can kind of divulge into a lot of different ideas with this. But this isn't the first time that Yukimura has kind of given us an idea, spelled it out in short, more nebulous terms, shall we say, like Thorfinn does in this chapter. I'm always kind of sitting there, what does Thorfinn mean? No, he's done this with what a true warrior is, a true warrior needs no sword, you have no enemies, there's no one that you should hurt. And when you read those, you're like, with hindsight, you're like, yeah, that's pretty obvious flaws. But the rest of the story is what has built and clarified and added the extra nuance to what their initial statement is. We actually fully understand what a true warrior is now because we've experienced it with Thorfinn. And this is the same thing with something like the Curse of the Crown. When the Curse of the Crown and that idea is presented to us, initially by Sven says exactly what it is. But it's only through watching Canute throughout the farmland and the rest of the story that we're like, oh, this is how that Curse of the Crown, whatever that may be, what Yukimura described it as, what Sven described it as, is actually being built out and made more, and is flourished from that. And this is the same thing when Yukimura kind of comes up to us and says, hey guys, I have a new concept for you, most dangerous man. So you bet your bloody heart I was keeping my eye on this guy from the very beginning. What is this most dangerous man? It's even the chapter title. We got to find out who this most dangerous man is. And lo and behold, chapter 186 comes around, and I'm thinking to myself, ooh, yeah, this guy, you know, he's a bit of a different type of guy to Ivar, you know, this helmet dude, this Sturk dude, right? You know, Ivar's kind of that brawn. This guy seems to be a bit more of the brain, you know, he's kind of got that Canute vibe to him. You know, definitely more trickster, not trying to be so upfront with his strength. So, you know, you kind of have this long list, and you're like, okay, I'm going to keep my eye on this guy, you know, for a little bit longer. And then 3 chapters later, we get the big explosion chapter with Mitheg Piquer, and at the end of that, he's like, we must get rid of the Norse. And, you know, alarm bells are ringing here. We're like, oh, another man, another dangerous man. And then we keep on going, and what do we see? We see Sturk building up to be more and more of a man that is, you know, talking about fear of men. Men, you know, we aren't, Gudrid, we're not all like Ivar. We're not all herder. We want to go fight and find some war. And actually, most men instead just are scared. They want to prepare for the worst. And just because us men are like this, you know, there are other men out there that will think just the same. You know, we may see this manifest in Pulmug later, where Pulmug's looking at the sword and is thinking, oh my word, these guys have this technology. I'm fearful for myself now, you know, and this fear builds up. And boom, this is the same thing where, you know, trying to prevent a little bit of war now to keep more peace later. That's the mentality of a most dangerous man. And so Mitheg Piquer, most dangerous man. Sturk, oh, got a little bit of a red circle around him. Looks like a most dangerous man. And then we get this chapter. And I think we can probably a bit more comfortably say that Sturk is not one of these most dangerous men, because Sturk doesn't fear war because he doesn't think it's going to happen, but also he doesn't know what it is. In the same way that Ivar idolizes war, Sturk is kind of playing with it in a very abstract sense, like he's an armchair philosopher. He's the Redditor, you know, us, you know, myself included, when we're debating this whole war thing. We're thinking to ourselves, all right, okay, you know, well, Thorfinn could have done this, or Hild could do this, or actually the shaman's perspective is like this. And he's sitting there with his crossed arms, playing these political games, being like, but war's not actually going to happen, you know, I'm just trying to help my buddy Ivar get out here, you know, I'm supporting him because he's my bro. That's what I think is Sturk's main motivation, actually, is quite... He's doing everything for Ivar, because I think people forget that in chapter 191, Sturk actually kind of asks, hey Ivar, should we just kind of go along with the Thorfinn chap here? Sturk isn't looking out for power for himself. He just wants to support his main man, Ivar, because he believes in his strength. He believes that Ivar has his best intentions for each other. And it actually seems like they had some sort of miscommunication in chapter 200 when Ivar's like, oh, actually, I don't love war. I've never experienced war. I don't know what that war would be to love. I just greatly admire it. I have this picture of what war is, and it looks fantastic. It looks beautiful. The glory, the honor, into Olmar, into Sigurd, into, you know, Ari as a character. There's so many of them that kind of show like this, and Ivar's actually probably the most nuanced and arguably mature so far out of all these guys, which I really like as like a new wave of this type of character that Yukimura loves to kind of write about in each and every arc. And this is why I say he's probably not one of these most dangerous men, because he has no reason to hate war, to fear war, because he doesn't know much about it. He just says he fears war as more of like, oh, this is what lots of men do think, not necessarily what I think. So he's a bit wily in that way. But, you know, we lost one most dangerous man, but when one taketh a dangerous man away, one giveth right back in the form of Hild. I think we can very comfortably say that Hild is playing into some sort of most dangerous woman, most dangerous person. It's not exclusive anymore. And Yukimura comes out of nowhere and says, oh, look for the most dangerous man. And we're like, oh, wait, look at all the men. And then it's like, oh, no, one of them is a woman. I don't know why I'm making such a big deal about this. I just thought it was kind of cool, you know, a little bit of a little twisty, you know, for all of us to kind of keep our eyes out for. So we have a perfect archetypical, I don't know, archetype of the most dangerous man in Mitheg Piquer. But then we also have a little few different strands, one in Stirk, but then also one in Hild. And what does Hild occupy here? Hild, to me, what I currently think, is playing a very different role that is kind of splintering off of Thorfinn. Thorfinn, very interestingly, hasn't told anybody about his past. He doesn't gloat about it. It makes perfect sense for his character, but also perfect sense for his ideology. Lots of the time, you know, Ivar ironically says, you know, strong men don't talk to weak men and stuff like this, not knowing that he's the weak man in this conversation. And that's because Thorfinn doesn't want to exude any implicit threat of violence towards other people. If other people in the settlement know that Thorfinn could just 1v1 any of them individually, or even mass slaughter if he really wanted to, pretty much the whole camp, maybe aside Cordelia and Hild would definitely be a big hurdle to overcome. But aside from those, like, Thorfinn, anytime he steps into an argument, people would listen to him, not because of his ideas, which Thorfinn is very particular about, but because of the threat of violence he gives. This is part of his talk with Halfdan when he's trying to find a way around the police system. When you're talking to the Prime Minister or a member of royalty, if you want to go back into more medieval times, or if you're part of Britain, there is always this sense that the government holds the monopoly on violence in most of our current societies. And we live mainly peaceful lives because that government reserves that violence for certain purposes, particularly and most obviously to exert justice. This is this kind of role that Snake played in the Farmland arc, and even Hild played a little bit in the Baltic Sea War, this strong sense of justice. And we're coming back to Hild here. Ultimately, someone has to enforce the rules. And Thorfinn, in his talks with Halfdan, kind of wants to avoid this, to avoid having some sort of standing army, some sort of law enforcement. And this is a bit of a trouble for him because Ivar broke the rules, he broke the agreement, and Ivar still now has the sword. Not only because democratically he was voted by the rest of the villagers to be correct and they want to follow him in that, so Thorfinn wouldn't go against the will of the people because he's not authoritarian like that, but it's also because Thorfinn wouldn't want to be, you know, just grab it off of him. Ivar would have to willingly give up the sword. So how does justice work in Vinland? And this is a question that's still not answered. But Hild kind of is stepping back into this justice role. Hild as a force of vengeance, despite being vengeful and not good, she was incredibly precise about her not owing Thorfinn anything and her being very just as an individual. She calls out injustices where she sees them. She wants to be this almost blind justice, this lady revenge, this almost nemesis of sorts, the blind lady holding the scales of fate and balance in our hand. And that's kind of a role that she plays, you know, when if Thorfinn doesn't pay his debts, it is just that she kills them. And now she's, you know, progressed from that and she's coming back into that role. She's repeatedly got frustrated by Thorfinn not showing his strength, not showing his hand, not being more forceful in getting these ideas across. Thorfinn is very much, hey, let's balance it out in the marketplace of ideas. I don't want to necessarily maybe color it like that, but that's what it kind of feels. Everybody, let's just talk and hash it out and we'll feel good. And Hild's like, no, sometimes there needs to be boundaries on what you can and cannot say. Hild, when Ivar says, Thorfinn's super weak, bro, and Thorfinn's not going to be like, Ivar, you're an idiot. I could have totally stopped that. No, Thorfinn doesn't think about that. Oh, he's instantly in there trying to help and heal and stop the blood and wounds from Miss Higbequer. He's instantly thinking about that. Hild, on the other hand, is like, no, Ivar, you're a bloody idiot. You are completely wrong. Thorfinn's way stronger than you. And it's Hild that highlights that. Interestingly enough, Hild also highlights that, you know, we have to play political games as well. We can't win with just voting with the women, and so on and so forth. And so Hild eventually comes to this conclusion where she's like, I've got to do something about this, and I'm not going to be a victim to another group of men once again. I am actually stronger this time. I'm not a child anymore. I can do this. I can make a difference in this situation. I will not be the weak one this time. And so lots of us were like, wait, is Hild actually going to try and kill these people? Is she going to assassinate these people? And let me reiterate once again that Hild is a very strong force for justice. She is one of the main tension points of her arc in the Eastern Expedition. It's the fact that, we don't want Hild to kill someone because she is morally pure in that aspect. She hasn't killed anybody else, and we want to keep her from falling to that state. That's a massive deal. And so I don't think we would I think we would see more struggle and internal monologue if she did want to actually try and kill these people. And she's kind of, her intentions are keeping kind of nebulous to make us think, oh, she was trying to kill Iva there, or she's really going after Miss Higbee-Quare now. But I don't think that's the case. There's a couple of reasons for this, and shout out to Mir for kind of, you know, a couple of days after the chapter came out, we had a good discussion about this on the Discord server. So we're not here, come and join the server, baby. You know, it was great. You know, you get to chat to your favorite YouTube pal, Jarky Bacon, and you don't have to listen to my stupid rambles on YouTube for free. Unbelievable. Hild doesn't miss, and there would be a way bigger deal if she did miss. She keeps on kind of goading and trying to get Iva to stand up to really scare him, and that's what I really think she is doing. She's trying to scare Iva into doing something. She's trying to give that implicit and also explicit threat of violence, and being like, hey Iva, if you don't do what I want you to do, you're gonna die. Even though she probably, and my kind of headcanon with Hild is that she would probably never be able to really kill someone. I don't think she could. And there's some really interesting characterization here for Hild, because Iva shouts out to her, it's like, hey, Hild, why are you doing this? Like, you realize that you're going to ostracize yourself and the rest of the community for this. And Hild is like, yeah, I know that. Like, she's willing to give it up, all of it up, for the sake of preserving peace for the children, so they don't have to experience what she went through. And she's going to actually be this blind vengeance of justice to border patrol between these two tribes and groups of people. And what I was initially unsure of, if Hild's intention was to actually kill Iva, was because when Thorfinn comes into it, she seems very, very upset at this. It makes her think back more onto her actions. It makes her have to morally consider what she is doing, and it makes her question her convictions. It kind of tempers the storm a little bit. And I think what's also really interesting about this is a couple of details. Who was in the background and kind of shown as a focus, interestingly, in chapter 182, it was Hild. She was chilling there. She was having a good old time, snoozing along, but also listening to Thorfinn and paying a lot of attention to it. And also another interesting thing is that in chapter 198, Thorfinn makes this quote of, there won't be war, I won't allow it, something along those lines. And Hild in chapter 199 says the exact same thing, where she's like, there won't be war, I won't allow it. And there's almost this kind of parallelization, that's a word, of Thorfinn and Hild once again, where they are kind of the same mindset, but going around in very different ideas. And so where do I think it's going to go? I think Hild is probably going to try and also scare the shaman, Miss Higbee-Quare. I kind of hope that Nisquadija comes into it as well. She has to track him and find her, but Hild's tracking abilities are very good, even if it is a unknown forest to her. Ultimately, I think she is going to mess up somehow, majorly so. And that's going to lead to a certain situation that is going to devolve from there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you for listening to my ramble again. I don't know how long this has gone on, but if you like more of this stuff, please tell me if you like the face stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of effort putting panels on the screen, so I can fill up a lot of time doing this kind of stuff. I don't know. I probably want to listen to you guys anyway. I always ask for feedback, and then I change, and I'm like, oh, it needs to be artistic, and I need to make this thing 3D or something. Instead of plastering on the screen with great efficiency like other YouTubers do. Not just efficiency in terms of editing, but in communicating information, where you're like watching, like, oh, hang on, there's like a 3D thing coming across the screen. Oh, what does that read? Oh, okay, that's what it reads, and all that stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you guys around next time. Bye-bye.